Now, so we'll go ahead and George, I'm going to continue with you 4th of July. Feel like that'd be appropriate. I could have done more of the Constitution, but like I said, there's so much more there. I kind of jumped ahead. I don't remember where I was, so I'm just going to jump into this. I don't remember which book this was, but I know it's you. To William Minor, Mount Vernon, May 27, 1785. Sir, my objection to paying your account when here was, now is, and whether it is done or not will be, that it comes neither under the letter nor spirit of my letter to Mr. Baker. My object was to give lost Posey a year's schooling to fit him for some of the better occupations of life. To do this, I agreed to pay his board, also, both of which together I was informed would amount to be free school to £17 mid-curry. That what followed? Why, he neither went to the school nor boarded with the person under whose care he was intended to be put. This by your own confession. Is it just? Is it reasonable, then, that I should look back to expenses which had been incurred previous to the date of my letter, nor even forward that might be incurred if the end which I had in view was not to be answered by it? If the child did not go to the school, nor derive the benefits which were intended him from it, could it be supposed I meant to pay for his board without? When his father's house and I were more proper than any other, might he not as well have been at home with his father as at any other place idle? Upon these grounds, as under this state I repeat it, that if there is a disinterested man upon earth who will say I ought to comply with your request, I will do it, and you may have the choosing of him or them, for it does not suit me to go from home on this business. I am N.C. To John Harvey, Mount Vernon, May 31st, 1785. Sir, I am informed that a patent, in consequence of the certificate from Commerce appointed to inquire into and decide upon claims for settlement of the western lands, is about to issue to the heirs of Michael Crecept from the land office of this Commonwealth for a tract of land on the river Ohio, formerly in Augusta County, now commonly called and distinguished by the name of Round Bottom, against granting which is to the heirs of the said Crecept. I enter a caveat for the following reasons. First, because this land was discovered by me in the month of October 1770, and then marked, which was before, as I have great reason to believe, the said Crecept, or any person in his behalf, had ever seen or had the least knowledge of the tract. Secondly, because I did at that time, whilst I was on the land, direct Captain William Crawford to survey the same for me, my use as halfway place or stage between Fort Pitt and the 200,000 acres of land which he was ordered to survey for the 1st Virginia Regiment, agreeable to Governor Dinwiddie's proclamation of 1754. Thirdly, because consequent of this order, he made the survey in the month of the year following for 587 acres and returned it to me accordingly. And equally certain I am that it was made before Mr. Crecept, or any person in his behalf had ever stretched a change thereon, knew of, or, as I have already observed, had taken a single step to obtain the land. Fourthly, because subsequent of this survey, but previous to any claims of Crecept's, a certain Dr. Briscoe possessed himself of the land and relinquished it, after I had written him a letter in the words contained in the enclosure number 1. Fifthly, because upon the first information I received of Crecept's pretensions, I wrote him a letter of which number 2 is a copy. Sixthly, because it was the practice of Crecept, according to the information given him, to notch a few trees and sell as many bottoms on the river above the little Kanawha as he could obtain purchasers, to the disquiet and injury of numbers. Seventhly, because the Commerce gave the certificate under which his heirs now claim could have had knowledge of my little thereto, being no person in that district properly authorized during my absence to support my claim. Eighthly, because the survey which was made by Colonel Crawford, who was legally appointed by the masters of William and Mary College for the purpose of surveying the aforesaid 200,000 acres, is expressly recognized and deemed valid by the first action of the Act, entitled an Act, see the Act, as the same was afterwards returned by the survey of the county in which the land lay. Ninthly and lastly, because I have a patent for the said land, under the seal of the said Commonwealth, signed by the Governor in due form on the 30th day of October, 1784, consequence of a legal survey made by the 14th of July, 1773, as just mentioned, and now of record in the Land Office. For these reasons, I protest against the patents issuing for the land of which the commissioners have given a certificate to the heirs of Mr. Cresap, so far as the same shall interfere with mine. The legal and equitable right thereto being in me, if I am defective in form in entering this caveat, I have hoped to be excused and have my mistake rectified. I am unaccustomed to litigations and never disputed with any man until the ungenerous advantages which have been taken of the peculiarity of my situation, and the absence of 8 years from my country has driven me into courts of law to obtain common justice. I have the honor, etc. To Tench Tillman, Mount Vernon, June 2nd, 1785. Dear Sir, as your letter of the 30th, although did not reach me until late this afternoon, and as the post goes from Alexandria at 4 o'clock in the morning, I have scarcely a moment to write you a reply. I was not sufficiently explicit in my last. The terms upon which Mr. Falconer came to this country are too high for my finances and numerous expenses. I do not wish to reduce his, perhaps well-founded, expectations, but it behooves me to consult my own means of complying with them. I had been in hopes that a young man of no great expectations might have begun the world with me, for about 50 or 60 pounds per ann Virgia curry, but for one qualified in all respects to answer my purposes, I would have gone as far as 75 pounds. More would rather distress me. My purposes are these: to write letters agreeably to what shall be dictated, do all other writing which shall be entrusted to him, keep accounts, examine, arrange, and properly methodize my papers which are in great disorder, ride at my expense to do such business as I may have in different parts of this or other states, if I should find it more convenient to send, than attend myself to the execution thereof, and which was not hinted at in my last, to initiate 2 little children, a girl of 6 and a boy of 4 years of age, descendants of the deed, Mr. Custis, who lived with me, and a very promising. In the first rudiments of education, this, for both parties, would be mere amusement, because it is not my desire that the children should be confined closely. If Mr. Falconer should incline to accept the above stipend in addition to his board, washing, amending, and you, upon a close investigation of his character, temper, and moderate political tenets, should find him competent to the duties above mentioned, and sooner he comes the better of my purpose would be promoted. If I had time, I might have added more, but few would have been unnecessary. You know my wants, you know my disposition, and you know what kind of man would suit me. In haste, I bid you adieu, with assurances of great regard and sincere friendship. I am, N.C. To David Stewart, House at Bath, Mount Vernon, June 5th, 1785. Dear Sir, the celebrated Mrs. Macaulay Graham and Mr. Graham, her husband, are here on a visit. As I wish to shew them all the respect I can, I should be glad if you, Mrs. Stewart, and your sister will come tomorrow or next and dine with us. I am, etc. P.S. Come tomorrow if convenient.
Enemy soldier incoming.
To James Rumsey, Mount Vernon, June 5th, 1785. Sir, your letter of the 10th of March came safe, but not in a short time after the date of it. The reason which you have assigned for giving me an order on Mr. Ryan is perfectly satisfactory. I wish that or any other expedient would have extracted from him what he owes you. From the account give me his circumstances and conduct after you have incurred a bad debt with the manager of the theater. As the large house you was to build for me was in such forwardness at the date of the above letter, and as you expected to have had it raised by the 1st of May last, I am very well satisfied with the advance it has made, and that it should continue, provided you can make it convenient to wait a while for your money. Nay, but I should be wanting a candor were I to give you assurances of speedy payment. The kitchen stable I would gladly have finished as soon as possible, and whatever the cost of them amounts to, I will settle for without delay. It gives me much pleasure to find by your letter that you are not less sanguine in your boat project than when I saw you last, and that you have made such further discoveries as will render them of great utility than was at first expected. You have my best wishes for the success of your plan. Enclose your proceedings of the directors of the Potomac Navigation. I pray you to have them set up some public place. If the manager advertised for can some recommended liberal wages will be given him. If were to be wished that the following qualities could be readily combined in the same person, integrity, abilities, indefatigable industry, and if he has not experimental knowledge of this particular kind of work, at least that he may be possessed of a genius which may soon fit him for it. Mr. Ryan's note is enclosed, and I am with great esteem, sir, etc. To William Carmichael, Mount Vernon, June 10th, 1785. Sir, it is with grateful pleasure I sit down to acknowledge the receipt of your favor of the 25th of March, covering a triplicate of your letter of the 3rd of December,
Take them down.
and a copy of that Count of Florida Blanca's note for you.
Locations are marked on your
I feel myself under singular obligation to you, sir, as the mean of procuring 2 jacks at the first race to be sent to me. But my gratitude for so condescending a mark of esteem from one of the first crowned heads in Europe calls for a better expression than I have to make suitable acknowledgments to His Catholic Majesty, especially too as His Majesty's very valuable present was accompanied by a sentiment of approbation which cannot fail of making a lasting impression on my mind and of becoming very dear to my remembrance. It is to you, sir, I must stand further indebted for the manner of making known in terms most acceptable the high sense of entertaining of the King's goodness. The jacks are not yet arrived, but I hope they soon will, and the account which you mean to transmit of the mode of treating them for the propagation of mules will be equally necessary and acceptable for my management of them. Mr. Gardaquai is safely arrived at Philadelphia. I have not had the honor of paying my compliments to him, but as well for the respect I owe his sovereign, and his own great merit, as on account of your recommendation of him, I shall be happy in every opportunity which shall offer of shewing him all the attention in my power. Great Britain, viewing with eyes of chagrin and jealousy the situation of this country, will not for some time yet ever pursue a liberal policy towards it. But unfortunately for her, the conduct of her ministers defeat their own ends. The restriction of our trade with them will facilitate the enlargement of congressional powers, commercial matters, more than half a century would otherwise have effected. The mercantile interests of the country are uniting as a man to vest the federal government with ample powers to regulate trade and to counteract the selfish views of other nations. But this to be considered as another proof that his country will ever unite in position to unjust or ungenerous measures, whensoever or from whomsoever they are offered. I have the honor, etc. To William Goddard, Mount Vernon, June 11th, 1785. On the 8th instance, I received the favor of your letter of the 30th of May. In answer to it, I can only say that your own good judgment must direct you in the publication of the manuscript papers of General Lee. I can have no request to make concerning the work. I never had a difference with that gentleman but on public grounds, and on my conduct towards him upon this occasion was such only as I conceive myself indispensably bound to adopt in discharge of the public trust reposed in me. If this produced in him unfavorable sentiments of me, I yet can never consider the conduct I pursued with respect to him either wrong or improper. However, I may regret that it may have been indifferently viewed by him, and that it excited his censure and animadversions. Should there appear in General Lee's writings anything injurious or unfriendly to me, the impartial and dispassionate world must decide how far I deserved it from the general tenor of my conduct. I am gliding down the stream of life, and wish, as is natural, that my remaining days may be undisturbed and tranquil, and conscious of my integrity. I would willingly hope that nothing would incur attending to get my anxiety, but should anything present itself in this or any other publication, I shall never undertake the painful task of recrimination, nor do I know that I should ever enter upon my justification. I consider the communication you have made as a mark of great attention, and the whole of your letter as a proof of your esteem. I am and see.
Let's have ourselves a fight.
To Edmund Richard, Mount Vernon, June 15, 1785. Sir, your letter of the 1st of February from Plymouth Dock came safe. In explicit terms, I assure you that the information which I suppose you must have received respecting the will and the plantations of Mr. Richard Richards is without the smallest foundation. I never heard of the man, his will, or the estate which you say was left in my hands until your letter reached me. Equally unacquainted am I with Lawyer Haynes or Lawyer Britton. Consequently, can you give no satisfaction in any of the matters requested of me. If any such event as you speak of ever did happen with any of my name, it is unknown to me. It is not in my power, therefore, to give you any clue by which you may pursue your inquiries, or I would do it with pleasure. I am, etc. To Samuel Powell, Mount Vernon, June 15, 1785. Dear Sir, I have been honored with your favor of the 25th of April, but have not yet had the pleasure of seeing Dr. Moyes on the 22nd instant. I shall look for him. I pray you to be assured that it is unnecessary for you to apologize to me for the introduction of any gentleman of whom you entertain a favorable opinion, such as you conceive worthy of my civilities will always meet a welcome reception at Mount Vernon. I shall now, my good sir, give you a little trouble. A gentleman whose person, whose name, and whose character are equally unknown to me has written me the enclosed letter, to which as yet I have made no reply. The work, if well executed, would unquestionably be valued and not to be encouraged. But the abilities of the author I am a stranger to, and it has been too often found that similar attempts by persons whose reputation is not established in the literary world are found in ignorance, or in an imposition to encourage the first or to give sanction to the latter would be alike disagreeable to me. I would beg, therefore, if it not likely to be attended with much trouble, that you would be obliging as to give your own, and the sentiments of others on the author and his performance, that I may be enabled to decide properly with respect to his request. My respectful compliments and best wishes, in which Mrs. Washington joins, are presented to Mrs. Powell and yourself, and I am, dear Sir, etc. To Robert Howe, Mount Vernon, June 15, 1785. Dear Sir, a few days ago Mount Sitgreaves gave me the pleasure of receiving your letter of the 4th of May. It is the only one I recollect to have had from you since my return to private life. It gives me pleasure to hear that Congress have dealt honorably by you and mean to do more. It is devoutly to be wished that they could do the same by all the officers who, meritorious service and sufferings, have a just claim upon their gratitude, and call loudly for their exertions. As you are at the source of intelligence, anything I could say respecting foreign matters would only be a reverberation of intelligence. A few things occur of a domestic nature worthy of recital. Mrs. Washington is in tolerable good health, and joined me in compliments and best wishes to your Mr. Lott's family and others of our old acquaintance. I am, etc. To William Minor, Mount Vernon, June 16, 1785. Sir, your letter of the 14th is the moment delivered to me. Moral obligations, or the obligations of humanity, therefore induce me to bestow a year's schooling in Lost Posey, and to effect it I was willing to incur the expense of a year's board also. The same motives might have induced you, without making a charge of it against me, to have acted a similar part in other respects for the boy. For sure I am, my connection with him is not stronger, nor legal honorary obligation greater on me than on any other means to excite them. Schooling, I reiterate in this letter, as I urged in my former, was my object. Consequently, if he did not go to the free school, nay, in Queen Anne, the place designed, as you yourself acknowledged to me, nor any other school, for what purpose, let me ask, was I to pay £17? Was not his father's house, if time was to be misspent, the best place for him to waste in it? Can it be supposed I had ever had in contemplation to board him out for the purpose of idleness? If then the condition of my letters to Mr. Baker was never complied with, you as candidly confessed to me, they were not when here. Where is the justice of requiring £17 or an iota of it from me, when the compensation was expressly stipulated? But I will be done. I am too much engaged in company and business to go further into the detail of this matter. If General Robardu, whom you mentioned to me yourself in a former letter, will be so obliging to undertake to determine the point, I shall be perfectly satisfied with his decision. I shall expect, however, that both his letter and my former to you, which was directed to his care, and such papers as you exhibited to me, will be laid before him, one of which certified the lost Posey was not at the free school. Another, in effect, that you charge was antecedent to the date of my letter to Mr. Baker, and a third from Captain Posey to you, which will serve to prove that he was a housekeeper at Rover's Delight. At the time you want me to pay you for the boy's board, when he was not at school, nor ever derived the benefit which was the object of my benevolence. I am, etc. To the Secretary at War, Mount Vernon, June 18th, 1785. Dear Sir, my dear Sir, I am quite ashamed to be so long deficient in acknowledging the receipt of your favors of the 24th and 29th of March and 5th of May, but an intervention of circumstances have prevented it. I gave me great pleasure to hear of your appointment as Secretary at War without a compliment. I think a better choice could not have been made, and though the salary is low, it may, under the circumstances you mentioned, be considered as auxiliary. Enclosed is a certificate of service for Major Sergeant, of whose worth I have a high opinion, but for want of a more competent knowledge of the time of entering the line of the army and the commissions he has borne, I could not be more particular. At any time this summer the limestone would be useful to me, but the sooner it comes, the greater benefit I shall derive from it, as the walls for which I want it are now in hand. The sentiment which you have dropped respecting the approbation of the shares which were intended for me by the Assembly of the State in the navigations of the rivers Potomac and James is very pleasing, and would give me great pleasure to see it realized. For want of competent view of the designs of Congress respecting the Western Territory, and not knowing how matters stand with Great Britain respecting the posts of Detroit and other places at present occupied by British garrisons on the American side of the line, I feel an unfitness to answer your question respecting such posts as may be proper for the purposes you mentioned. But under the ideas I hold at press, I am inclined to think that if garrisons are to be established within the limits and jurisdiction of any of the 13 states, the Fort Pitt or Fort McIntosh, whichever shall be found most convenient and in best repair, would suit very well for a post of deposits, from whence all the others should be supplied. And as it is my opinion that great part of the furred peltry of the lakes will be transported by the Cahoga and Big River Creek, a post at the mouth of, or at some convenient post on the former, must be eligible. The spot marked Miami Village and Fort in Hutchin's map I have always considered as of importance, being a central point between Lake Erie, Lake Michigan, and the River Ohio, communicating with each by water to these the falls of the Ohio, or some more convenient spot for the lower sediments, may be added. Whether this chain embraces territory enough, whether it goes far enough to the southward to afford protection to the back parts of Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia, or whether these objects, which are meant to be comprehended, are for those who are more behind the curtain than I am, to determine. My opinion of the matter is, that I have described a sufficient extent of the country to answer our present purposes, beyond which neither settlements nor locations of land ought to be admitted, because the larger would open a more extensive field for land jobbers and speculators, weaken our frontiers, exclude law, good government, and taxation to a late period, and injure the Union very essentially in many respects. At the conflux of the great Kanawha and Ohio, a post might be established so as to answer beneficial purposes. Indeed, it is the opinion of many that it is more eligible place at Pittsburgh, and in time, if the navigation of the Kanawha should extended and in easy communication open the James River, it may be so. But in the present state of things, considering the settlements about the latter and the resources from whence proceeded all the supplies of that country, it certainly is not. As the protection of the river and the movements thereon, it is desirable. If I am right in my principles, some such distribution is the following may not be ineligible for the 700 men which are ordered to be raised. At Fort Pitt, Fort McIntosh, or the mouth of Big Beaver, only 100 men. Cahoga, from which the detachment might occupy the carrying place between that water and Big Beaver, being on the line and most exposed, should have 200. Miami Fort, or village, and dependencies do. At the falls of the Ohio, or some spots more convenient and healthy on that river, at the conflux of the Great Kanawha and Ohio for security of the river, protection of trade, and covering immigrants, total 700. Mrs. Macaulay Graham and Mr. Graham and others have just left this after a stay of about 10 days. A visit from a lady so celebrated in the literary world could not but be very flattering to me. Mrs. Washington joined me in best wishes for yourself, Mrs. Knox, and family. With great truth and sincerity, I am, etc. To Barb Marboy, June 21st, 1785. The last post brought me the honor of your favor of the 12th instant. I am made happy by occasions which induce you to write to me, and shall take pleasure in rendering Mr. Corney any service in my power. I will immediately inform myself of the name and residence of the treasurer of the societies in Cincinnati and State, and transmit Mr. De Corney's bill and Colonel Wadsworth to him. I am obliged to you, sir, for the several communications in your letter. I wish something disagreeable may not result from the contentions respecting the navigation of the river Mississippi. The immigration to the waters thereof is astonishingly great, and chiefly from the description of people who are not very subordinate to the laws and constitution of the states they go from. Whether the prohibition of the Spaniards, therefore, is just or unjust, polite or impolite, it will be with difficulty that a people of his class can be restrained from the enjoyment of natural advantages. It is devoutly to be wished that Mr. Gardecourt would enter into such stipulations with Congress as may avert the impending evil and be mutually advantageous to both nations. After the explicit declarations of the Emperor respecting the navigation of the Scheldt and his other demands upon Holland, it should seem, I think, as if he stood in a predicament not very desirable. For if he recedes, his foresight and judgment may be awry, and if he proceeds, his ruin may be involved. But possibly I am hazarding sentiments from a superficial view of things, when it will appear ultimately that he has had important objects in view and accomplished them. I take the liberty of addressing the enclosed letter to your care, and to assure you the respect and esteem that which I had the honor, etc. A bug went in my mouth, excuse me. To John Rumney, Mount Vernon, June 22nd, 1785. Dear sir, I stand indebted to you for two letters, one of the 8th of September, the other of the 9th of February. The first should not have remained so long unacknowledged, but for the expectation I had of the second led me to expect a third, upon the receipt of which I meant to give you but one trouble by replying to them all at the same time. Permit me to thank you, sir, for your attention to my commissions. The joiner arrived safe, and I believe would fully answer your description and expectation of him. He gives great satisfaction and seems well satisfied himself. The expense of his passage and your advance to him has been paid to Mr. Sanderson. I delayed making choice of either of the simple flagstone until I had seen the Irish marble and was made acquainted with the cost of it. But as it is not yet arrived, and I like the whitest and cheapest of the 3 samples which you sent me, my Captain Atkinson, I request the favor you to forward by the first opportunity, as much of this kind as will float the gallery in front of my house, within the margin and border that goes round it, and is already laid with a hard stone of the country, is 92 feet, 7½ inches by 12 feet, 9 1/4 inches. Having given the exact dimension of the floor or space which is to be laid with flagstone, I shall leave it to the workmen to procure them of such a size as will answer best and accord most with the taste of the times. I take it for granted that 7½ D of 8D is the price of the white stone in the prepared state in which it was sent, and the shipping charges and freight only are to be added to the cost. If a rough estimate of the latter had been mentioned, it would have been more pleasing, as I could then have prepared accordingly. I am at a loss to determine what manner their dress flags can be brought without incurring much expense, or being liable to great damage. To put them in cases will involve the first, and to stow them loose the other may be sustained, unless great care is used in the stowage, which is rarely to be found among sailors, or even masters of vessels. If the flags are well dressed, a little matter will chip the edges and break the corners, which will disfigure the work and hurtful to the eye. I will give no direction, therefore, on his head. Your own judgment on the spot shall dictate at that same time, I have but little doubt. If they are placed in the hold of the ship with a hay or straw to keep them from rubbing, of their coming free from damage, I will soon follow this letter from a remittance from hence, or draft upon London for a sum to enable you to discharge the undertaker. In the meanwhile, let me pray you to hasten the execution and shipping of them, as my gallery is very much in want, with great esteem, etc. Now, I appreciate you.
Head to the safe zone. You're losing
To William Grayson. I mean, I can always print it out and take it downtown. But I mean, it still would not have the same effect. I'm still trying to figure that out. To William Grayson, Mount Vernon, June 22nd, 1785. Dear Sir, since my last to you I have been favored with your letters of the 5th, 27th, and of May, and beg your acceptance of my thanks for your enclosures, and for the communications you are pleased to make therein. I am very glad to find you have passed an ordinance in Congress respecting the sale of the western lands. I am too well acquainted with the local politics of individual states not to have foreseen the difficulties you met with in this business. These things are not to be regretted, but not to be altered until liberality of sentiment is more universal. Fixing the seat of empire at any spot on the Delaware is, in my humble opinion, demonstrably wrong. To incur an expense for what may be called the permanent seat of Congress, at this time, as I conceive evidently impolitic, for without the gift of prophecy I will venture to predict that under any circumstance of confederation it will not remain so far to that Edward Long, and that until the public is in better circumstances it ought not to be built at all. Time too powerful for sophistry will point out the place and disarm localities of their power.
I could use some of those.
In the meanwhile, let the widow, the orphan, and the suffering soldier who are crying to you for their dues receive that which can very well be rendered to them. There is nothing new in this quarter of an interesting nature to communicate unless you should not have been informed that the Potomac navigation proceeds under favorable auspices. At the general meeting of the subscribers in May last, it appeared that upwards of 400 of the 500 shares had been engaged. Many more have been subscribed since. A board of directors have been chosen. Proper characters and laborers advertised, for to commence the work in the last difficult parts of the river till a skillful engineer can be engaged to undertake those which are more so, and it is expected that the work will be begun by the 10th of next month, with great esteem and see. To the President of Congress, Mount Vernon, June 22nd, 1785. Dear Sir, I stand indebted to you for your favors of the 3rd, 7th, and 29th of last month, and feel myself exceedingly obliged to your Excellency for the communications and enclosures therein. It gives me pleasure to find that an ordinance of Congress has passed respecting the Western Territory. A little longer delay of this business, and I believe the country would have been settled. Maugre all that could have been done to prevent it. As it is, I am not clear that the same respect will be paid now to this ordinance, which would have been at an early period before men began to speculate in lands number west of the Ohio and to obtrude themselves thereon. From the general tenor of my letters and from my respectable characters in France, I think it most likely that the dispute between the Emperor and Holland will be settled without bloodshed, and that the former will hardly be able to effect the exchange of his Northumberland dominions for the Duchy of Bavaria, among other reasons because the Duke of Ponce, nephew and heir to the Elector, is opposed thereto. But notwithstanding that, the state of politics and temper of some of the formidable power of Europe are such as to place war at no remote distance. I have just parted with Mr. and Mrs. Macaulay Graham, who after a stay of about 10 days left us in order to embark for England from New York. I am obliged to you for introducing a lady to me whose reputation among the literary is high, and whose principles are so much and so justly admired by the friends of liberty and of mankind. It gives me pleasure to find that her sentiments respecting an inadequacy of the powers of Congress is also those of Dr. Price's coincide with my own. Experience evinces the truth of these observations, and the late movements of the mercantile interest exhibits a recent proof of the conviction it is working in the popular mind. But it is unfortunate for us that evils which might have been averted must be first felt, and our national character for wisdom, justice, and temperance suffer in the eyes of the world before we can guide the political machine as it ought to be. The plan for improving and extending the navigation of this river is in a promising way. Enclosed, I do myself honor of sending you the printed proceedings of the Board of Directors. Mrs. Washington joins me in a compliment and every good wish for you, and with great esteem, etc. To Richard Bolton, Mount Vernon, June 24th, 1785. Mr. Bolton, your letter of the 4th instance never reached me until Monday last. I do not enter into agreements, but with an intention of fulfilling them, and I expect the same punctuality on the part of those whom they are made, and you must therefore perform yours with me, or abide the consequences. The reason which you assign for not coming is futile, and can have no weight with your creditors. your property, and your labor are all means with which you can satisfy them. A mortgage or bill of sale of the first, and an order on me by my way of security of the latter, as your wages shall arise, is all they can desire, and these are in your power to give them. You know the purpose for which I engaged you, and that they are important and urgent. That I waited a considerable time after Colonel Fitzhugh had recommended you to me, without applying elsewhere for your answer, that near a month more was elapsed since our agreement took place, that the season is now far advanced, and workmen consequently so much engaged is not to be procured. In the meanwhile, the roof of my house yields to every rain, and the furniture in no part of it is secure from the injuries which result therefrom. Their reasons will fully justify my holding you to the engagement we have entered into, and I expect you will enter upon the performance of it without delay. I am, etc., a roof? To Governor Patrick Henry, Mount Vernon, June 24th, 1785.
Solid work evading the enemy. You're clear for
Dear
now.
Sir, the letter which your Excellency did me the honor to write to me on the 10th instant came duly to hand, and calls for my particular acknowledgments and my grateful thanks for your obliging offers. Although I conceive that the sunken land lying on Albemarle Sound and the waters emptying into it will in time become the most valuable property in this country, yet when I reflect further that it will require considerable advance to reclaim and render them fit for cultivation, and in the meantime that they may be subjected to expenses, I believe it would be most advisable for me in my situation not to add to my present expenditures, but I am so much obliged by your friendly offer to serve me in this matter as if they had actually been rendered. If your Excellency could make it convenient to give me the substance of the report of the commerce, respecting the place and manner which are thought best for a cut between the waters of Elizabeth River and those of North Carolina, I should think myself obliged. The improving and extending the inland navigation of the waters of this country are in my judgment very interesting to the well-being and glory of it, and I am always pleased with my accounts which seem to facilitate those important objects. With great esteem, etc. To Thomas Montgomery, Mount Vernon, June 25th, 1785. Dear Sir, in the evening of yesterday I was favored with your letter of the 21st, and thank you for your early and friendly attention in the inquiry I made of you. I do not now recollect whether I was so explicit as perhaps I ought to have been in communicating all the purposes for which I wanted an assistant. They are these. A gentleman who can compose a good letter from the heads which shall be given to him. Do all other writing which shall be entrusted to his care. Keep accounts, examine, arrange, and properly methodize my papers. Ride at my expense to do such business as I may have in different parts of this or other states, if I should find it more convenient to send them, attend myself to the execution thereof, and occasionally to devote a small portion of time to initiate 2 little children in the first rudiments of education. A fit person who inclines to accept these employments will live as I do, be company for those who visit at the house, have his washing and mending found him, and such wages as we can agree upon, which I must be candid in declaring cannot be high, as my finances and expenditures will not admit of it. If you think Mr. Shaw competent to these ends and find him disposed to be employed for them, I wish to know it by the return of the post, as there are other offerings. If you would write to me or to you upon the subject, the letter in the latter case to be enclosed to me, I would form some judgment of his handwriting and diction. He will please to dignify the lowest wages which he will take per ann or quarterly. If he chooses a personal interview, which perhaps may be more agreeable, I should be glad to see him here, with some samples of his writing, with great esteem, etc. To Reverend Stephen Bloomer Balk, Mount Vernon, June 26, 1785. Sir, my nephews are desirous of going to the dancing school in Georgetown kept by Mr. Tarterson, I think his name is, and as it is my wish that they should be introduced into life with those qualifications that are deemed necessary, I contend to it. Some time ago I expressed my approbation of their learning French, and a wish that when you had got your house in order to receive them, they might again board with you. Although I have no occasion, the care, attention, and kindness of Mr. Bailey to them, I conceive they can board at no place so eligibly at their preceptors. For it is my wish that their morals as well as education may be attended to, and though I do not desire they could be deprived of necessary and proper amusements, yet it is my earnest request that they may be kept close to their studies. I am, etc. Now. What hap? To Thomas Montgomery, Mount Vernon, June 30th, 1785. Dear Sir, I received your favor of the 28th last night. I was under promise when I wrote to you on the 25th of giving an answer to an application which had been made to me in a few days before, which are now nearly expired, that I may be decisive on it. I should be glad to know precisely what Mr. Shaw would expect for his services if he comes to me. For though I cannot, as I observed in my last, afford to give high pay on the other hand, so neither would I by any means leave it indefinite on the other. Whatever stipulations I enter to shall be strictly complied with, which will leave no cause for discontent. I am the more explicit in these declarations because I am apprehensive that higher pay is expected from me than I can afford to give. Mr. Shaw undoubtedly has set a value upon his services. He knows what he has received from former services. It is not reasonable to expect that any gentleman will lessen his prospects by coming to me, nor do I desire it. I do not expect him for less than he can obtain elsewhere, but if my means will not enable me to give as much, I must do without, or get one less capable of assisting me. Another thing in Mr. Shaw's proposals is not very agreeable to me. If a gentleman does not engage with me for some fixed time, I may in a month, nay less, be put to greater nonplus than ever, which would be inconvenient and perhaps injurious to me. Short engagement and early notice of discontents might answer the purpose of Mr. Shaw and remove my difficulties. That matters may reduce to a certainty, and I am able to give the answer above alluded to in time. I send this by a special messenger. I am obliged to attend the board of directors in Alexandria tomorrow, but whether I shall be detained there longer, it is at present uncertain. I should be glad, therefore, if it is convenient to see Mr. Shaw here this evening, or on Saturday, or at Alexandria tomorrow, when upon a little conversation we can readily determine whether our purposes can be reciprocally answered. He will not, indeed cannot, be considered in the light of a preceptor, because this is, I observed in my last, is only occasional and secondary. I am, etc. To the Countess of Huntingdon, Mount Vernon, June 30th, 1785. My Lady, in the last letter which I had the honor to write to you, I informed your ladyship of the communication which I had made to the President of Congress of your wishes to obtain lands in the Western Territory for a number of immigrants as means of civilizing the savages and propagating the gospel among them. In answer, he informed me that Mr. Henry, governor of this state, had laid your ladyship's letter and plan which were addressed to him before Congress in a full and ample manner. But his private opinion of the matter was that under the pressure of debt to which his fund was to be appropriated, and the diversity of sentiment respecting the mode of applying it, that no discrimination would, or indeed could be made in favor of immigrants of any description whatsoever. I waited, however, a considerable time to know the result of Mr. Henry's reference, before I would give your ladyship the trouble of another letter on this subject. But hearing nothing more of the matter, and having had the enclosed resolutions and ordinance sent to me by the President himself, as a result of the long and painful deliberations on the mode of disposing of the Western lands, I will delay no longer to express my concern that your ladyship's humane and benevolent views are not better seconded. The resolutions and ordinance herewith conclosed will give the terms and shew your ladyship the mode by which the lands belonging to the Union are to be obtained. In other words, how difficult it must be for foreigners to know when or where to apply for them, with the highest respect and consideration, etc. To William Washington, Mount Vernon, June 30th, 1785. Dear Sir, my nephew, deliver me your letter of the 21st of April. For the kind attention shewn him by Mrs. Washington and yourself, he entertains a grateful sense, and I offer you my sincere thanks, which I should be glad to renew to you both in person at this place. He enjoys a tolerable share of health, but is gone to the Sweet Springs to obtain a better stock to fit him for the pleasures and duties, too, of a matrimonial voyage on which he is to embark at his return. I would thank you, my good sir, for the acorns, nuts, or seeds of trees, or plants not common in this country, but which you think would grow here, especially of this flowering kind. The best method, I believe, to preserve those which are apt to spoil by withering and drying. And from worms is to put them into dry, saying as soon as they are gathered, this retains the moisture in them and vegetative properties without sprouting. Mrs. Washington joins me in best respects to you and your lady, and I am, etc. To William Blake, Mount Vernon, June 30th, 1785. By my nephew, I have the honor to receive your favor of the 20th. Mar, accompanied with some plants and seeds at the Palmetto Royal, for which I pray you to accept my sincere thanks. The former are not only alive yet, but look vigorous, and the latter are vegetating and appearing above ground. I shall nurse them with great attention. It would give me a great pleasure to visit my friends in South Carolina, but when or whether ever it may be in my power to accomplish it, it is not at this moment in my power to decide. I have the honor, etc. To George William Fairfax, Mount Vernon, June 30th, 1785. My dear sir, when I wrote you in February last, I intended to have followed it with a letter of earlier date than the present, but one cause succeeding another has prevented it till now. I proceeded to a diligent search for the paper requesting in your favor of the 23rd of August last year, and after examining every bundle and indeed despairing of success, it occurred to me that your account with Lord Fairfax might afford some clue by which the discovery of it might be made. And in looking in your ledger for an index, I found the receipts pasted on the cover of the book. Having a call to Richmond the latter end of April, I took the receipts with me, intending to leave them in the hands of the Attorney General. But it being his opinion there would be no occasion for them, I brought them back and restored them to the place from whence I took them. The enclosed are copy of those receipts, which I meant should supply the place of the originals, had they passed from me to the attorney. I have not yet received the pictures which you were so obliged as to send me by Mr. Bracken, but I have some prospect now of getting them, as Colonel Bassett, who left this lately, and who expects to be up again in October to the marriage of his daughter, who lives with us, with the son of my brother Charles, has promised to bring them. Although I have been so long deprived for the copy, I have lately had the pleasure of seeing the original in the hands of the designer and executioner, Mr. Pine, who spent 3 weeks with me in May last. Mr. Pine has met a favorable reception in this country, and may I conceive command as much business as he pleases. He is now preparing materials for historical representations of some of the most important events of the war, and if his choice and execution is equal to the field, he has to display his talents in the pieces. Will do him much credit as an artist, and be interesting for America and its friends as a deposit for their posterity. The information which you have given of the disposition of a certain court coincides precisely with the sentiments I had formed of it from my own observations upon many late occurrences, and from a combination of circumstances. With respect to ourselves, I wish I could add that as much wisdom had pervaded our counsels as reason and common policy most evidently dictated, but the truth is the people must feel before they all will see. Consequently are brought slowly into measures of public utility. Past experience or the admonitions of a few have but little weight where ignorance, selfishness, and design possess their major part. But evils of this nature work their own cure, though the remedy comes slower than those who foresee or think they foresee the danger attempted to effect. With respect to the commercial system with GB is pursuing with this country, the ministers in this, as in other matters, are defeating their own ends by facilitating these powers in Congress, which will produce a counteraction of their plans, and which will half a century without would not have invested that body with. The restriction of our trade and the additional duties which are imposed upon many of our staple commodities have put the commercial people of this country in motion. They now see this indispensable necessity of a general controlling power and are addressing the respective assemblies to grant this to Congress. Before this very state thought itself competent to regulate its own trade, and were verifying the observations of Lord Sheffield, who supposed we never could agree upon any general plan. But those who will go a little deeper into matters than his lordship seems to have done will readily perceive that any measure where the federal interest is touched, however wide apart the politics of individual states may be, yet as soon as it is discovered they will always unite to effect a common good. The subscriptions for improving and extending the inland navigation of the Potomac have filled very fast. A company is incorporated, a president and directors are chosen, A dividend of the money will soon be paid in, and the work will begin about the 1st of August. We still want a skillful engineer, a man of practical knowledge to conduct the business, but where to find him we know not at present. In the meanwhile, the less difficult parts of the river will be attempted, that no time may be lost in effecting so important and salutary an undertaking. Our course of husbandry in this country, and more especially in this state, is not only exceedingly unprofitable, but so destructive to our lands that it is my earnest wish to adopt a better. And as I believe no country has carried the improvement of land and the benefits of agriculture to greater perfection than England, I have asked myself frequently of late whether a thoroughbred, practical English farmer from a part of England where husbandry seems to be best understood and is most advantageously practiced could not be obtained, and upon what terms. The thought having again occurred to me whilst I was in the act of writing this letter, I resolved as a more certain and eligible mode of having the questions determined, to propound them to you. That a man of character and knowledge may be had the very high wages, there can be no doubt. Money, we know, will fetch anything and command the services of any man, but with the former I do not abound. To engage a man upon shares, as the overseers of this country are, might be productive of such discontent to the employed. For we could scarcely convey to do good English farmer or just idea of the wretched condition of our lands, what dressings they will require, and how entirely our system must be changed to make them productive. And if we do not, disappointment and continual murmurings would be the consequence. It follows, then, that the only means by which we can think of obtaining one must be to give standing wages. For what, then, my good sir, do you think a sober, industrious, and knowing farmer might be had to take one of our plantations? Say of 10 laborers? Or to bring the matter nearer to his own conception of things, a farm of about 250 acres of cleared land to be stocked with a competent number of plows, black cattle, sheep, and hogs. When I speak of a knowing farmer, I mean one understands the best course of crops, how to plow, to sow, to mow, to hedge, to ditch, and above all, Midas-like, one who can convert everything he touches into manure, as the first transmutation towards gold. In a word, one who can bring worn out and goaly land to good filth in the shortest time. I do not mean to put you to the trouble of actually engaging one, but I should be obliged to you for setting on foot the inquiry, and for communicating the result of it to me, because I could not receive your answer in time for the next year, the autumn being, as you well know, the season at which our overseers are engaged, and our plans for the ensuing crop must be formed. These inquiries, as you will readily perceive, are pointed to a farmer of the middling class, which more than probably will best answer my purpose. But if it could be made convenient to you to extend inquiries further, permit me to ask if one of a higher order could be had, and upon what terms. I mean for a steward. It may not in this place be amiss to observe to you that I still decline the growth of tobacco, and to add that it is my intention to raise as little Indian corn as may be. In a word, that I am desirous of entering upon a complete course of husbandry as practiced in the best farming counties of England. I inquire for a man of this latter description with little hope of success. First, because I believe one who is completely fit for my purposes would be above my price, and secondly, because I have taken up an idea that an English steward is not so much a farmer as he is an attorney or an incompetent. Because few of the nobility and gentry having their estates in their own hands stand more in need of a collector who, at the same time that he receives the rents, will see that the covenants of the leases are complied with, repairs made, and see, than of a farmer. In this, however, I may be mistaken. One thing more, then I will close this long letter. It from your own observation, or from good information, you should fix your eyes upon men of one or both of these descriptions, and could ascertain his or their terms. I had rather he or they should be personally known to you, or their characters well ascertained by a friend in whom you can confide, because what you are, or such a person would say of them, I could rely upon. But how often do we find recommendations given without merit to deserve them, founded in a disposition to favor the applicant, or want of resolution to refuse them? oftentimes indeed to get rid of a dependent who is troublesome or injurious to us upon what are called decent terms. A man in the character of a steward would live in the house with me and be at my table in the manner Lund Washington was accustomed to do, who is now married, and a housekeeper, though still attending my business. The common farmer would live on the farm which would be entrusted to his care. I have lately had the pleasure of receiving your favor of the 19th of March, and to learn by it that Mrs. Fairfax and you have enjoyed better health than usual. Last winter, a countenance of it Mrs. March and I most sincerely wish you. I have not yet seen Mr. Thos Corbin. He sent you a letter under cover a few days ago with assurances of making me a visit as soon as he had recovered from a slight indisposition. He appears from your account to have been very ill treated by his brother Dick, but the latter, I understand, has not been behind him in charges to some of his friends in this country who think Thomas in the wrong. Mrs. Washington joins me in most affectionate regards and in every good wish for your Mrs. Fairfax. With much truth I am, and C. P.S. I thank Mr. Hartley for this compliment he sends me through you, and for this his other polite attentions to me, and pray you to make mine acceptable to him whenever a proper occasion offers. I did not know your nephew intended trip to England, or would I most assuredly have written to you my as good an opportunity. To Giles Vancouver, Mount Vernon, June 30th, 1785. Sir, your favor of the 16th of last month came safely to hand. You do me much honor by proposing so inscribe a work to my special patronage and protection, but though willing to give every support to the encouragement of literature and useful knowledge, which may be within my sphere of action, yet on the present occasion I must beg leave to decline the honor of having your labors dedicated to me. With cheerfulness I will follow the subscriptions of gentlemen of my acquaintance, and with a proper sense of the distinction meant for me, I am, etc. To James Rumsey, Mount Vernon, July 2nd, 1785. Take a 5-minute breather. To James Rumsey, Mount Vernon, July 2nd, 1785. Sir, early in the last month I wrote you an answer to your letter of March 10th and sent it under a cover to my brother in Berkeley, who happened at that time to be from home. The presumption is, however, that you have received ere this, and I shall not trouble you with a repetition of the sentiments therein contained. In the letter I enclosed you a handbill of the proceedings of the Board of Directors, containing an advertisement of their want of manager, 2 assistants, some overseers, and a number of laborers, requesting that it might be exposed at some public place in the county where you live. Those of the first descriptions were required to meet the directors at Alexandria on yesterday. But whether the notice was too short, or that the characters who are competent to the business are difficult to be met with, I shall not take upon me to determine. But none appearing with such testimonials of their abilities, industry, and integrity, as the board conceived indispensably necessary for their justification. No agreement was made, but the 14th instant appointed for them and others to produce such of their qualification for this business. As I have imbibed a very favorable opinion of your mechanical abilities, and have had no reason to distrust your fitness in other respects, I took the liberty of mentioning your name to the directors, and I dare say if you are disposed to offer your services, they would be attended to under favorable circumstances. But as this is a business of great magnitude, and good or ill impressions in the commencement of it will have a powerful effect on the minds of the adventurers and on the public opinion, and as the directors are no more than trustees of the company, and of consequence must proceed circumspectly, candor obliges me to observe to you, I believe some of those who will meet for the purpose of appointing a manager and assistants have only a superficial acquaintance with you, that it might be well, if you incline to offer your services, to bring some letters or other credential of your industry and see. And if these were to come from members of the company, they would have the greater weight. Colonel Gilpin is on his way of the Falls of Seneca and Shenandoah. It would be fortunate if he should meet with you on this trip. I am set up. Well, I do have letters of recommendation on the hieroglyphs. I haven't been approached either by anybody. This is all new to me. Excuse me. I appreciate you, though, if that's what you were asking. The greater weight. Happy 4th. How now? We're getting there. To Robert Hanson Harrison, Mount Vernon, July 3rd, 1785. Dear Sir, in the interval between your leaving this and the arrival of Mr. Briscoe, Mr. Montgomery recommended a young man whom he thought would answer my purpose, and being desired to speak to him, he accepted my offer, and he will be with me in the course of a few days. Had it not been for this, a good character given Mr. Briscoe by you and others would have induced me without hesitation to have accepted his services. I thank you very sincerely for the ready and early attention you paid to my inquiries. To assure you of the great esteem and regard I have for you is unnecessary, because you must be convinced of it. I shall only add, therefore, that I am, etc. To William Shaw, Mount Vernon, July 8th, 1785. I hope all is well. Sir, your letter of the 4th I received on the 6th, although the sum stipulated is above the mark I had prescribed myself yet, in consideration of the good character given of you by Mr. Montgomery. Drunk, are we? The idea I entertain of your knowledge of accounts, and the hope that you may answer my purposes in other respects. I accede fully to the terms of your letter, with this condition only, that in payment of this sum, dollars shall be estimated at 4 and 6 pence sterling, and other gold and silver coin, in that proportion. This is a legal difference of exchange of it, and will render it unnecessary for either of us to inquire into the rise or fall, to ascertain the value of any payment. I do not request you to come hither before the time mentioned in your letter, but should be glad if you would not exceed it. With esteem and regard, I am, etc.